Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whatever the I Want podcast, where I, your host, Gaby, get to talk about whatever the I want. And today's episode is going to be about grief. So I want to start off this episode by saying a trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about death, loss, infancy loss in general, grieving. So if you personally cannot handle a topic like that, I highly suggest you click out of this video and that you watch some of my previous content. But if you are going to stick around, I hope that you know that this is a space for me to be vulnerable, and this is a community where we can all share our experiences. And I do feel like grief is something that needs to be talked about more, and it, in a weird way, allows you to connect to people all over the world because we all experience loss at some point. So it will be emotional. I have experienced quite a bit of grief in my life. I'm going to be mostly talking about grief in terms of losing somebody, but I mean, I've lost a lot of things in my life, like relationships, jobs, things like that. But today we're going to be focusing on the loss of people. So I started going to funerals at a very young age. I would go to funerals of my grandparents' siblings. They're like extended family. I would always go to extended family's funerals. Every time I went to Mexico every year for the summer, I would end up going to somebody's funeral is what it felt like. And so during that time, I saw people grieving, but I wasn't necessarily grieving myself because I wasn't close to these people. They were just, part of my extended family. And so it wasn't until I lost my tia Julia, which she passed away when I was in college, to breast cancer, where really loss just started happening at a very rapid rate. So I lost her to breast cancer. I also lost another tia of mine to breast cancer as well, my tia Viola. And my connections with each of the family members that I've lost have been so different. My tia Julia was a aunt by marriage. My tia Viola was an aunt by blood. And that loss was harder in a different way because I was there leading up to her final days. And if I remember correctly, I was in the house when she passed away. And that was really hard. Just seeing her on her deathbed, and she would talk a lot about seeing a light and seeing my grandparents on my dad's side who had also previously passed. We're going to be jumping around a lot. So with my tia Viola, I had a different connection with her because a lot of people in my family have told me repeatedly that I look like her. Te pareces como Viola is what a lot of my family tells me. And even my abuelita, up until she passed away, would ask me if I was Viola, or she would tell me, or she would ask, ¿Eres hija de Viola? And it's just so crazy because, I would call her my twin because everybody in my family tells me how much I look like her, how I have a similar body type to her, and how we're just both petite. And it's not something that I ever fully grasped, I think, until she was passing away, where I was like, wow, I have this special connection to somebody. And it also makes you realize like how strong genetics are, like I have these features of my tia, and that goes back generations, like the features that she has were probably from another family member. And that's why I feel like it's also so important to love yourself as you are, because you're a culmination of so many people and you are living history. So losing my abuelita, again, the timeline of all of this stuff is off. Losing my abuelita, my dad's mom, was hard in a different way because she was older, right? She died in her 90s, and her connection with my dad was undeniable. Like, she called my dad El Rey de Mama, which means Mom's King. And the reason why he had that nickname was because he was premature, and they said he could fit into the palm of your hand and in a shoebox. And so she would always tell my dad that he was going to make it someday because as a baby, he was able to survive, being born in Mexico, not having any medical care. And he was able to get through that so he could get through anything. And my dad is also legally blind in one eye. And I believe she's the driving force of my dad. She is the reason why my dad is the man he is today. Because it was through her believing in him that he found a way to believe in himself. So that loss was really hard because I also saw a lot of my tias grieving, and you could see just how much my abuelita had impacted our family. And although there was a language barrier because she only spoke Spanish, she was always very sweet, would always be making cornbread, and would always offer us food, like constantly offering us food. And she was just, very small. She had curly hair and it was gray, and she was she was like my height. And so I'm one of the shortest people in my family, and it's interesting to see again, like genetics, just like what parts that you get from certain people. Not long after my abuelito passed away, my dad's dad, and that loss was a little different because I guess we weren't really prepared for it. He was in really good health for a while, but you could tell after he had lost, his wife of a very long time, that I guess he started to really realize what life was like without her. One of those situations where it's like you don't know what you have until it's gone, and it seemed like that loss really impacted him. And it was just really hard because I remember the first Christmas that they both were gone. My tia Josie just was in the house wailing. And she's one of my more emotional tias. And I think that's been a big part of grief, is like, although I might have not been extremely close to some of these family members, seeing the way my family members who I was closer to, who I am closer to, grieve the loss of their parents, grieve the loss of their siblings, of their of their family. It's very different because I'm experiencing the grief on my own, but on top of that, I'm just seeing just how much more impactful these people were in their lives. So it was really hard watching my dad lose both of his parents. And I think one of the biggest things I've ever done for my dad was the day of my abuelita's funeral. I drove on the way back. So to the funeral, my dad drove. And whenever we were getting in the car heading home, I was like, I'll drive. And he normally will fight you on that. Like, no, I'll drive. I got it. But he didn't fight me at all. Just quietly sat behind me. My sister, my mom, and my dad, all of us in the truck. And windows down. And I could just see my dad crying from the rearview mirror. Because he lost one of his pillars. And that was really hard. But I was really comforted at the fact that I could be there for my dad in that way, even if it was something as simple as driving to give him the opportunity to grieve. It also felt weird that day because my abuelita's favorite color was pink. My sister and I wore pink eyeshadow and stuff, and it just feels so weird getting ready for a funeral where you're just like, why am I putting on makeup to just cry it all off? And you're doing little things like wearing pink to commemorate this person, and you're like, it feels so wrong but so right at the same time, because it just feels, you just feel so empty, but you're trying to find a way to like grasp all the other emotions that come along with grief. And I truly believe in the 5 stages of grief. I definitely think that you're in denial. You're angry, and at some point you have to reach acceptance, and that's one of the hardest parts. So along with my tia Viola, her husband had passed away, my tio Tony, and that was really hard watching a lot of my cousins lose their parents. So I experienced it at a different generation of seeing my dad lose his parents, but then now I was seeing cousins of mine lose both of their parents. And I've gone to quinces where they do the father-daughter dance, or a dance with a grandparent, and they'll be holding their picture, or they'll have pictures of family members who have passed away there, and that in a lot of ways can heal the grief, but it also brings it all back as if it never went away. But it is nice to know that you're not grieving alone, that you have a community of people, you have a family of people, friends who have also lost this person. But all the losses have impacted me, but I think what impacted me the most was losing my nephew Grayson. He was stillborn, and I couldn't wrap my head around it because, whenever you see somebody pregnant, you fully expect for them to deliver a healthy baby that's alive, and that's not always the case. And so my sister-in-law is Black, and Black women are known for having higher risk pregnancies, for getting preeclampsia, eclampsia, things like that. And they're also known for doctors not taking them seriously, which is a big reason why we need better healthcare for women in general, people, but especially Black women. So she basically couldn't feel the baby move from like one moment to the next. She laid down, she ate, she did what she could to try to see if it would wake Grayson up, and it didn't. And so she eventually went to the hospital. They had her deliver the baby, and he was stillborn. I was living in Miami at the time, so I get like a text from my mom saying like, hey, your brother and his wife, they lost the baby. Are you gonna, like, she updated me, and then out of nowhere, like, was like, are you gonna come? And I'm like, what? Like, I can go? Like, I'm just so confused. Like, I'm trying to grasp my head around what's happening. I quickly take a shower, get ready, and like head out, go straight to the hospital. And I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if you ever do. But I get into the room, and I just see my brother and his wife, and she's heavily medicated, and I just see Grayson there, and I got to hold him, which was really nice, but it was also really hard. And I have pictures, it's like the one and only day I ever got with him, at least like physically. And I remember when I was holding him, I got a little like startled because I felt something really cold, and I didn't realize it was his feet because they were keeping him on ice to preserve him. And it's just so hard because whenever you touch a human's body, you feel their warmth, but whenever they're gone, you feel the cold. And it was also through that loss that I really realized, that Drake lyric, like, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. I couldn't really wrap my head around the fact that, like, a baby, like, a baby wasn't given, like, one day of, like, experiencing the world, from outside of the womb. Like, it was just really, really hard on me, really hard to grasp. I remember I would just sit in the bathroom and just sob and sob and sob. And it was hard too because I wasn't living extremely close to my family, so I was really like grieving a lot on my own. And then one of my closest cousins lost her baby, and through a miscarriage, and that was really hard for everybody. And I think sometimes people don't realize not that any death is easier than the other, but it's so hard to wrap your head around what ifs. At least with my abuelitos who were older, it's like, oh, where they're older, you kind of like expect in a way, for that to happen eventually, like they lived a long life, like you could at least like accept those things. But when it comes to a baby, you're like, you didn't get much time. And I mean, we go visit Grayson's grave, and not many people could go to the funeral because he passed away in 2020. We had to wear a mask. Like, not even everybody in my immediate family could go. One of my brothers has 5 kids. Like, not even all the kids could go. And they also held a viewing for him, but my brother and sister-in-law didn't know it was a viewing. They were just invited by the funeral home, and they just thought it was like, I don't know, to like sign papers or something, but they didn't realize like it was his viewing. And so we didn't get to go to that. So I literally, the only day I have of him in my head was the day I went to the hospital, and the day of his funeral, whenever we buried him. And the casket was so little, it was so tiny. And when you go to his burial site now, you just look around and you see all the toys and all the windmills, and you see all of the birthdays of kids, some who passed away just like him on the day that they were born. That's the day on their tombstone. Or you have some kids who passed away at 1, 2, 3 years old, 4, 5. And I don't think it gets any easier no matter how old they are, because it's still the loss of someone so pure and so innocent, like a child. And I think that's what's the hardest part is, all of the possibilities and choices that they could have had, but they didn't get the chance to. But it's also those losses that really show you like how big of an impact you can have without, I guess, like spending so much time on Earth. Like, the amount of time that they did have had such a massive impact that, again, like time, it doesn't matter. I think time can heal wounds, but I think in terms of grief, it doesn't necessarily heal it completely. It just allows you to accept what is and what isn't. But I do a lot of what I do now because of the loss that I've experienced. And what also helped me grieve was, I remember whenever I lost Grayson, there would be a bird chirping at the window. And there would be birds chirping at my window in every single place I've lived since then, including where I'm at now. And it'll happen like early in the morning, like doo, 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 or like a peck on the window. And I just know, I have this feeling. I know that it's him. And I think that also brings me comfort, is knowing energy is neither created or destroyed. So like, they're still here. They're just here in a different way. And sometimes I feel the presence of my family members when I'm outside and I can just feel the sun beaming on me, or the wind blowing, or sometimes it's through music or through food, or, like on their birthdays or on their anniversaries. You feel them stronger in some moments than others. But if you look and you listen closely, you will know that they're there. And yeah, I wasn't necessarily avoiding this episode. I just knew that it would be a heavier one. I am really grateful for the time that I have had with my family members. And I do think that through these losses, I've been able to bond more with other family members. But again, it doesn't get any easier. Sometimes when I see some of my aunts, they're emotional, and that's where I get a lot of my emotions from my aunts, from a lot of the women in my life, my mom, my grandma. We're very emotional beings. Our emotions can get very heightened. And so I can still see them grieving whenever they see their other siblings, or on certain holidays. You can just feel like something's missing. But it's through the laughter, through the smiles, and even the crying and the hugs that you really start to see grief in a different way, because grief doesn't always have to be sad. Grief can also, it's a very bittersweet feeling at times. You know, it's like, I know that you're not here, but I'm so happy to know you. I have also lost my sister-in-law's brother. His name was Will. And that was also a very different loss, because it was an unexpected loss. And I remember getting a call from my mom, and it was super early in the morning, and she goes, "Are you sitting down?" And so now I get really paranoid whenever people call me randomly or really early in the morning or late at night, because I think that somebody passed away. And I told her I was sitting down, and she broke the news to me. And during that phone call, my sister-in-law actually ended up calling me. And hearing her and her brother and my brother in the car telling me what they're experiencing. I don't know what it's like to lose a sibling. I don't know what it's like to lose a parent. And to hear them grieving the loss of their brother, again, something so unexpected, was really hard to hear. And one of her brothers at the time was studying to be a priest, you know, and they were immediately like heading to church, which I do think can be really helpful for a lot of people. I do think that grief allows you to lean onto others. It shows you that you have to. And I think one of the hardest parts is like knowing that life keeps going on. Like they're almost like frozen in time, and you're just still experiencing all these things. And I think what was the hardest for me was knowing that my nieces and nephews were losing an uncle so young. You know, most of them were 10 and under, you know, at the time. All of them were 10 and under at the time. And to know that they weren't going to get to see him throughout all the chapters of their life, that's what really hurt me the most. Because I don't think that it's fair for a child to grieve. It's not. Like, life can feel so unfair sometimes. I know that everything happens for a reason, but honestly, whenever you're grieving, you're like really mad, really angry, really confused, and it takes a while to reach acceptance. But I do hope that if you are grieving at some point, you do reach it. It just gives you comfort, and I do think that like going to church can help. I think for me, it's allowed me to lean into the universe a little bit more, and to understand that people are never truly gone. They're just in a different form. And again, all these losses happen so differently, especially with my tias who died from cancer. It was also hard to think about something so beyond their control, and like, why are they suffering? You know, because cancer is not, I don't know, like, I don't think any death is like a oopsie doo, you know, like they're all hard, but I think it's also really hard to see somebody, I guess, slowly wither away. You see their health decline, you see them lose their hair, you see their energy levels lessen. And it's almost like a slow death. And I think that is also really hard. Watching your family members slowly deteriorate compared to, you know, an older person just dying from old age, which is ultimately what my grandparents, my abuelitos, died from, old age. So that's the grief that I've experienced. And I know that I'm going to experience more loss in life. It's just a part of life. I am going to one day lose other family members. I'm going to one day lose potentially friendships, you know, a lot of other things. But I find comfort in knowing that we will reunite someday at some point, in whatever way that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. I'll have to die to tell you. Do you ever watch those dark humor TikToks? Like, they're so funny, but I mean, that's how some people grieve. They grieve through dark humor, through laughing. I know some people who hear terrible news and they'll like uncontrollably laugh, and everybody just deals with grief so differently. For me, I bawl my eyes out until they're like super duper swollen. I mean, it literally can sometimes look like somebody punched me in the face. But that's how I let it all out. And I do think journaling can help with grief. I think honestly, I talk a lot and I pray a lot to these family members. You know, like I'll start off some of my mornings saying like, good morning, Grayson. Good morning, Grayson. Good morning, Tia Viola. Good morning, Tia Tony. Good morning, Tia Julia. Good morning, Abuelito. Good morning, Abuelita. Good morning, Will. Hope you're all having a great day today. I had a random day where I was just dancing in the kitchen and I could feel Will there. And there's times where I can just randomly feel him near me and near my family. And that goes for every family member that I've lost. You can just feel their presence. Their energy is still here. It's never going to be gone. And it's through these stories, through talking about them, that will continue to keep their presence alive. So I highly encourage you to talk about your loved ones that you've lost, whether it be your pets, your family members, your friends, significant others. No loss is easy, but you're not in it alone. So I hope this helps heal you in some way and know that you're not alone. Love you all. Catch you in the next one.